The House Intelligence Committee spent a few hours talking with FBI Chief James Comey and NSA boss Admiral Mike Rogers. It was clear from the beginning that there was a political agenda, as there always is. Republican congresspeople wanted to know about the leakers, people within government giving classified information to reporters. That was their top concern. On the Democratic side, it was the Obama tap, the allegation that President Trump tweeted out. At this point, after today's testimony, there's absolutely no evidence President Obama tapped the Trump Tower. But today, White House spokesman Sean Spicer said there will be more tap information forthcoming, especially about the General Flynn situation. Now, the fair thing here is to be fair, avoid speculation, but skepticism on this issue is warranted. In addition to the tap business, Democrats zeroed in on two former members of the Trump campaign, hoping to link them with the Russians. First was a man named Roger Stone, who worked for Mr. Trump for 2 months in 2015. He was a consultant. Second was Paul Manafort, who worked for the Trump campaign for approximately 5 months, but did have a powerful position as campaign chairman. Democrats insinuated that both men were involved in some kind of corrupt scheme, but the Admiral and Mr. Comey would not take the bait, saying the investigation is ongoing and they cannot comment. Both men deny any wrongdoing. Talking points will be surprised if anything comes of this Russian deal. However, that controversy is what drove President Trump to accuse President Obama. Mr. Trump is so infuriated that the media has obsessed on the alleged Russian connection that he lashed out, trying to create a firestorm over the Obama administration's surveillance history. Problem is, there's no evidence that anything happened at the Trump Tower. There is evidence that the Obama administration surveilled journalists and even the German chancellor, but that does not go to President Trump's point. The accusation that President Obama was actively involved in harming the Trump campaign has now harmed the president himself. He needs the American people to focus on the economy, the new health care proposal, border security, not alleged conspiracies. In the future, the president would be wise to embrace only facts in his pronouncements. The issue of leaks, of course, is of vital importance, but both Comey and Rogers acknowledged that today. It was instructive to see that no Democrat on the House committee really zeroed in on the leakers. Talking Points expects the FBI to find out not only who leaked stuff about General Flynn and the Russian ambassador, but also who violated the White House protocol by putting out the president's conversations with the Prime Minister of Australia and the President of Mexico. If the FBI cannot do that, cannot arrest the leakers, this country's in major trouble. Summing up, Republicans want to get away from the tap thing. Democrats continue to peddle the Russia-Trump campaign situation. That's a memo. Now for the top story reaction. Let's first bring in James Rosen, Chief Washington Correspondent for FNC. So while you were listening to the tap stuff, and FBI Director Comey tap danced around that, saying he couldn't confirm an investigation, but didn't have any evidence or whatever he said. What's going through your mind, since you weren't exactly tapped, but you were surveilled by the Obama administration?
Well, good evening, Bill. Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina posed a series of questions to the FBI director about whether reporters should enjoy an exemption from the laws that make it a felony to disseminate classified information. And I felt at that moment, without resort to conceit, I think, that the specter of James Rosen kind of hung over the hearing room. But beyond that, what we saw on display today, Bill, was the difficulty that lawmakers have in holding James Comey to a coherent, consistent standard in terms of what he discloses about the FBI's investigations and when. In part, this stemmed from the fact that the lawmakers are at a big disadvantage in terms of who holds the information, but in part it's because Director Comey seems at times to make up Comey's rules as Comey goes along. I'll give you an example. Now, he confirmed quite famously today, and this is what all the headlines were about, the existence of an investigation by the FBI in unusual circumstances and where he says it's in the public interest. And he confirmed today, with the authorization of the Department of Justice, that FBI agents are investigating potential coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government last year. But when it came to aspects of this story that are of equal public interest, but only potentially more damaging to President Trump's opponents, such as whether Obama aides improperly accessed the names of Americans swept up in foreign surveillance or whether they leaked classified material to the press, Comey's own criteria of unusual circumstances and public interest suddenly didn't apply, and he couldn't confirm whether FBI agents are also investigating these things.
But didn't he do that with the approval of his boss, the Attorney General? Didn't he get permission to say, yeah, we're investigating the alleged Russian link? But he didn't get permission on the other side. I think that's what he would say.
He told us that he had the special dispensation of the Department of Justice to confirm, yes, that they're exploring alleged coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. He did not tell us that he sought any permission to confirm that he's also investigating.
I don't know if that were asked, though, Rose. And if you were there, it would have been. But I didn't hear it asked. So, look, I'm not a Comey fan. I'm not. But I don't condemn him for what he did today. I think that he operated within the guidelines that he was given. As we know, Attorney General Jeff Sessions has recused himself, but the second in command is saying, okay, you can do this. But I don't know if he did that. Last word.
There were other problems with Comey's testimony today. It was difficult to understand, for example, how and when the FBI arrived at the conclusion that the Kremlin was motivated by a desire to help Donald Trump's campaign, when the FBI had also concluded that the Russians were convinced, like most everyone else, that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. In other words, how and when could the Kremlin have resolved to help the Trump campaign, as the FBI director maintains, when the Kremlin, by the FBI's own account, believed that the Trump campaign was a lost cause?
Yeah, that was in August. Look, all of this stuff, I don't know if we're ever going to know about it because, you know, these things drag on forever. But I'm glad you're not in prison, Rose, and that's the big takeaway tonight. You're still cooking. And
back at you, Bill.
But I think these leakers, they got to be arrested. And we're going to deal with whether the press should be arrested, too, with Britt Hume coming up. All right, let's bring in Catherine Harris right now, Fox News chief intelligence correspondent. So what did you pick up? What was the most important thing you heard today from this testimony?
Well, one of the things that jumped out at me, Bill, was right at the end of the hearing, and the Republican chairman, Devin Nunes, seemed somewhat exasperated and even castigated the FBI director, saying that by confirming there's this open counterintelligence investigation, but then giving no indication whether there's evidence of collusion, and these are the congressman's words, he had put a big gray cloud over the current administration. And based on my experience, a CI case or a counterintelligence investigation is not something that's dispensed with in short order. Sometimes they take 2, 3, 4 years before they reach a decision about filing criminal charges. So we may have a very long road ahead here.
Yeah, but you're not going to know anything, and I don't think the folks even care. People who like President Trump made up their mind already, and people who don't have made up their mind already. So the other cable networks will talk about it ad infinitum, but I don't think we're even going to hear much about it. A late-breaking story I know you're aware of, that some airlines flying to the U.S. now have banned electronic devices, 13 countries.
That's right. That's right.
So that if you have a laptop, you can't use it on certain planes flying into the USA. Why? What's going on?
Well, based on our reporting, Bill, there's been a real uptick or spike in the threat reporting or the chatter in recent days and weeks, and this will apply to 13 countries flying into the United States, and it will also revive the liquids ban. My bottom line here is that Al-Qaeda is not dead. Al-Qaeda is the group that has really pioneered liquid explosives and had this singular focus on aviation.
All right, so our intel people, and again, that's probably done by wiretap, picked up a lot of chatter about an impending attack, and so the airlines from 13 countries have not been named yet, right? We know Jordan's one of them.
Jordan, that's correct. Jordan, and I think Saudi Arabia, as well. And there may be, some that are in the travel ban, but that's just me speculating here.
We'll know shortly. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Now let's bring in Mike Emanuel, Fox News chief congressional correspondent, who was at the Neil Gorsuch hearing today. Any headline come out of that?
Well, Bill, good evening. The highlights seem to be at the end of the day when Neil Gorsuch made his opening statement. He talked about his career as a judge, his family, and people were able to hear his voice and hear his own words. Judge Gorsuch talked about some cynics seeing basically judges as politicians wearing robes. He rejected that. He said that that's not what a life in the law is all about. It seemed significant because this was at the end of the day. He got the last word at a time when critics are saying he's a friend of corporate America, and he sounded like someone who's committed to enforcing the Constitution, following the Constitution and the rule of law.
Right.
I talked to some senior Republicans after the hearing, and they felt like his opening statement would make it a lot harder for some Democrats to oppose him because he sounded quite reasonable and quite measured, Bill.
All right, so he's going to have to stake out his turf as an independent jurist. And when you said at the end of the day, you literally meant at the end of the day. You weren't using that cliche, so I don't have to fine you, Emmanuel, and that's a good thing. I do believe that the Democratic Party is going to coalesce, and most of them will vote against him simply because he's not a liberal. Would I be wrong on that belief?
No, you're probably right. They sounded quite irritated still about the outcome of the 2016 campaign. They also sounded irritated that Judge Merrick Garland, who was President Obama's nominee, never even got a hearing. I think if you played a drinking game, taking a drink every time they mentioned the name Merrick Garland, you would be quite drunk, perhaps passed out at this point. And California Democrat Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat on the panel, said she saw it as her role to basically determine whether he was in the conservative mainstream or not, Bill.
Well, maybe her role is to find out if he's an honest judge. Mike, thanks as always. We appreciate it.